The emergency beacon rang through every inhabited system in the galaxy. It was the first time in 3,000 years that such a signal had been sent. Within hours, representatives from 247 species gathered in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, their holographic forms flickering with urgency and fear. The Archon, an ancient being whose species had guided the Council since its founding, spoke with a voice that trembled despite centuries of experience. "The sensors do not lie. They are coming. The Vex Armada approaches our galaxy." A horrified silence fell across the chamber. Every species knew the stories. The Vex were not conquerors who sought territory or resources. They were consumers, world eaters. They had destroyed 17 galaxies before this one, leaving nothing behind but empty space and scattered atoms. Their fleet numbered in the tens of thousands, each vessel the size of a small moon, supported by millions of smaller hunter ships that moved like locusts through space. "How long do we have?" asked Commander Thresh of the Cathara, a warrior species whose forearms were covered in ceremonial battle scars. 6 standard weeks until they reach the galactic rim," the Archon replied. "We must gather every ship, every weapon, every warrior. This is not a time for politics or old grudges. We face extinction." The response was immediate. The Cathara pledged 300 warships, their finest vessels crewed by their most experienced fighters. The Luxari, beings made of living crystal who communicated through light pulses, promised 200 dreadnoughts from their home system. The insectoid Zephyrini committed their entire swarm fleet, over 1,000 ships that fought in perfect coordination. Even the smallest species, those with only a handful of worlds and limited technology, promised whatever they could spare. For 3 weeks, ships poured into the staging area at the galactic rim. The gathering fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in known history. Thousands of vessels from hundreds of worlds, each different in design but united in purpose. Supply ships worked day and night to ensure every vessel was armed and ready. Commanders from species that had been at war with each other just months before now sat in the same planning rooms, studying tactical displays and preparing for the battle that would decide the fate of all life in the galaxy. Ambassador Jan of Earth sat quietly through most of these meetings. Humanity was the youngest species in the Council, having joined the galactic community only 2 centuries earlier. They were considered a minor power, technologically average, with a small fleet spread across their dozen colony worlds. When the other species spoke of their military contributions, they barely acknowledged the human representative, but when the Archon finally called upon Earth for its commitment, the chamber fell silent. Every species waited to hear what humanity would send. They had 40 colony worlds now, a respectable population, and had been building ships steadily for decades. Surely they could contribute at least 50 vessels, perhaps more. Ambassador Chun stood, her dark eyes calm as she faced the assembly. "Earth acknowledges the threat to our galaxy. We will fulfill our obligation to the Council. Humanity will contribute to the defense fleet. How many ships?" Commander Thresh demanded. "We need numbers, human." "How many vessels can Earth spare?" "1," Chum replied simply. The chamber erupted. Shouts of outrage echoed from every corner. Holographic displays flickered as representatives gestured angrily. The insectoid Zephyrini chittered in fury. The aquatic Meldari made sounds of disgust through their translation devices. "1 ship?" Thresh roared, his 4 fists slamming on his console. "1? The Cathara send 300. The Luxari send 200. Even the Fennet, who have only 5 worlds, send 20 ships. And you, with 40 colonies and 2 centuries of peace to build your fleet, send 1? This is cowardice," hissed Ambassador Celine of the VOR Collective, a species known for their military tradition. "Or worse, this is mockery. Does Earth think this is a joke? Do you believe the Vex will spare you when they devour the rest of us?" Chun remained standing, her expression unchanged. "Earth takes this threat with absolute seriousness. We are sending what is appropriate for our participation." "Appropriate?" The Archon's voice cut through the chaos. "Explain yourself, Ambassador." The Council mandates that every member species contribute according to their capability. Earth has capability. Why do you send only one vessel? Because one ship is all we need to send, Chun said quietly. And one ship is all we should send. Cryptic nonsense, Thresh muttered. What is this ship? Some miracle weapon? A dreadnought unlike anything we've seen? The US Resolute, frigate class, crew of 47. The chamber exploded again. A frigate was among the smallest military vessels recognized by the Council. Most species used them for patrol duties and escort missions. The idea that humanity would send a single small frigate to face the greatest threat in galactic history was beyond insult. It was madness. For 2 hours, the debate raged. Some called for humanity to be expelled from the Council. Others demanded sanctions. A few suggested that human colonies should be seized by other species to properly contribute to the war effort. But in the end, the cold reality remained. The Vex were coming, and the fleet needed to move to the staging ground immediately. There was no time to force Earth's compliance, no time for political maneuvering. The Archon made the final decision. Earth's commitment is noted. The Resolute will be given a position in the fleet. We proceed with what we have. 3 weeks later, the UESS Resolute arrived at the staging ground. Captain Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge, watching through the view screen as her small ship maneuvered through the massive fleet. They passed Kathara battlecruisers that dwarfed the Resolute 50 times over. Luxari dreadnoughts gleamed like floating cities made of diamond. Zephrani swarm ships moved in perfect geometric patterns, thousands of small craft acting as one organism. They're watching us, said Lieutenant Park from the communications station. Every ship we pass. I'm picking up short-range transmissions. They're laughing at us, Captain. Or cursing us. Let them, Okonkwo replied calmly. She was a tall woman with graying hair, pulled back in a tight bun. Her dark face showed the lines of 20 years in space, but her eyes were sharp and steady. We're not here for their approval. Captain, the fleet coordinator is assigning us to position, reported the navigation officer. Sector 7, rear reserves. They say we should stay out of the way and try not to get hit. A few crew members chuckled bitterly at that. First Officer Rodriguez, a stocky man with nervous hands, turned to the captain. They really have no idea, do they? No, Okonkwo said softly. And that's how it has to be. She looked at her crew, all 47 of them at their stations throughout the small ship. Every one of them was a volunteer. Every one of them knew what was coming. Some had families back on Earth, others had left no one behind specifically because of this mission. They ranged in age from 22 to 58. They came from a dozen different countries, spoke half a dozen first languages, but they were united in understanding one simple truth. They were not here to fight alongside the galactic fleet. They were here to do what no one else could do. What no one else should have to do? All stations report status, Okonkwo ordered, pushing the dark thoughts aside. There was still time. Maybe the galaxy would find another way. Maybe the Vex would turn back or be stopped by the assembled fleet, but deep in her heart Sarah Okonkwo knew the truth. In 18 days, when the sensors first detected the Vex tearing through the dimensional barriers at the galaxy's edge, everything would change, and the Resolute would fulfill its purpose. The sensors detected them 3 hours before they arrived. Deep space monitoring stations at the galactic rim began screaming warnings as their instruments registered impossible readings. Space itself was tearing open like fabric being ripped apart by massive hands. Commander Thresh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the wrath of ages, and watched the display with 4 eyes that had seen countless battles. But nothing had prepared him for this. By the ancestors, he whispered, they came through in waves. First, the reality tiers appeared as bright wounds in the darkness of space, each 1 kilometers wide. Then the first Vex ships emerged, and the crew of every vessel in the galactic fleet felt their courage waver. The Vex, capital ships, were not built, they were grown. Each one looked like a mountain of twisted metal and organic matter fused together in ways that hurt to look at. They were the size of moons, their surfaces covered in millions of weapons ports and what looked like mouths that opened and closed hungrily. Behind them came the smaller vessels, though smaller meant only that they were the size of cities rather than worlds. Millions of hunter-killer drones, each one a biomechanical horror that moved through space. Like sharks through water, the numbers kept climbing on the tactical displays. 10,000 capital ships. 50,000. 100,000. The counting stopped at 147,000 capital vessels, supported by what analysts estimated to be 8 million smaller craft. It was a fleet that had consumed 17 galaxies. A fleet that had never been stopped. All ships battle formation. The Archon's voice rang across the fleet-wide channel. Remember, we fight for everything we love. We fight for our homes, our families, our future. Today we make our stand. The Galactic Fleet moved forward. Thousands of ships, representing the combined military might of 247 species, accelerated toward the incoming swarm. The Luxari dreadnoughts formed the front line, their crystalline hulls designed to absorb and redirect energy weapons. Behind them, the Cathara battlecruisers spread their wings, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. The Zephyrini swarm ships scattered into complex patterns, making themselves impossible to target as a single unit. The distance closed. 5 million kilometers. 4 million. 3 million. At 2 million kilometers. The Vex opened fire. The battle that followed would be recorded in every history database in the galaxy, studied by military academies for centuries to come. But for those who fought in it, there was no time for reflection or analysis. There was only survival. The Vex weapons did not simply destroy. They unraveled. Their main cannons fired beams of purple-black, energy that touched matter and caused it to cease existing in any recognizable form. Ships did not explode when hit, they dissolved, their atoms scattered across space as if they had never been solid at all. Their smaller weapons were nearly as terrible, firing projectiles that bored through shields and armor like they were paper, but the Galactic Fleet did not break. The Luxari absorbed the first wave of fire, their crystalline structures glowing white-hot as they redirected energy back at their attackers. Cathara missiles screamed across the void, each one carrying enough explosive power to crack a continent. The Zephyrini swarm danced through the enemy formations, their small ships hitting weak points with precision strikes. For the first hour, it seemed possible. The Vex were powerful, but they were not invincible. Hundreds of their ships fell to the coordinated assault. Entire sections of their fleet were cut off and destroyed by clever tactical maneuvers. Commanders who had never worked together before found themselves coordinating attacks with the timing of veterans. But the Vex adapted. That was what made them truly terrifying. Every tactic that worked once became useless within minutes. They learned, they evolved, and they had numbers that the Galactic Fleet could not match. By the third hour, the first species was wiped out. The Fennec, who had bravely sent every ship they had, were gone. All 20 vessels destroyed. Thousands of brave warriors turned to atoms in seconds. The Meldari lost half their fleet when a Vex capital ship used some kind of gravity weapon that crushed 50 ships into a single point of compressed matter. By the 5th hour, the casualty report stopped meaning anything. The numbers were too large to comprehend. Hundreds of thousands dead. Entire bloodlines erased. Some species lost every ship they had sent. Others watched as their strongest vessels, ships that had defended their homeworlds for generations, were torn apart like toys in the hands of giants, and the Vex kept coming. For every ship the Galactic Fleet destroyed, the Vex did something that froze the blood of every commander who witnessed it. They recycled. The debris of destroyed vessels did not drift away. It was pulled back into the swarm, processed by the larger ships, and reformed into new units. The Galactic Fleet was fighting an enemy that could rebuild itself from its own corpses. Commander Thresh watched his tactical display with growing horror. 3 of his original 300 ships were gone. The carefully drawn battle plans were worthless. The Vex had broken through the front line and were now among the fleet itself, turning the organized formation into a desperate melee where every ship fought for itself. Pull back to defensive formation 7. He ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was useless. There was no formation that could save them. There was no tactic that would work. They were losing, and everyone knew it. In the rear of the fleet, far from the main battle, the UESS Resolute hung in space. On her bridge, Captain Okonkwo watched the battle with calm, sad eyes. Around her, the crew sat at their stations in silence. They had watched species they barely knew die by the thousands. They had watched ships that had mocked them days ago fight with courage beyond measure, only to be torn apart. "Captain," Lieutenant Park said quietly, "the Cathara flagship is broadcasting a final message. They're preparing for a last stand." Okonkwo touched her command console, bringing up the audio. Commander Thresh's voice filled the bridge, and even through the translation, his exhaustion and despair were clear. "To all ships, to all species, to anyone who survives this day, we fought with honor. We stood together when we had to. Tell our people we did not run. Tell them we faced the darkness and did not blink. This is Commander Thresh of the Cathara fleet. We make our final charge. May the ancestors guide us home." Okonkwo closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them, and her voice was steady as stone. "Helm, bring us about. Full power to engines. Communications, broadcast on all channels, military priority." "Captain?" First Officer Rodriguez turned to her. "It's time?" "It's time." The Resolute turned, its engines flaring to life. The small frigate began moving forward, accelerating toward the heart of the battle. On every ship in the fleet, communication officers received the same message, broadcast in every language spoken by the Council species, to all vessels. "This is Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the UESS Resolute. Emergency withdrawal. All ships retreat beyond the heliopause marker immediately. You have 18 minutes. I repeat, 18 minutes. This is not a request. This is not a suggestion. Retreat now. This is humanity's fight now." On the bridge of the Wrath of Ages, Commander Thresh stared at his communications officer in confusion. "What is the human saying? Has she gone mad?" "Sir, the Resolute is moving forward, alone, directly into the Vex formation." Thresh watched his tactical display in disbelief. The tiny human frigate, the ship they had all mocked, was accelerating past the fleet toward certain death. "What is she doing? Someone stop her." But other commanders, those few who had worked with humans before, remembered something. They remembered the quiet certainty in Ambassador Shun's voice. When she said, "One ship is all we need," they remembered that humanity had survived. Wars and disasters on their own world that should have destroyed them. And they had done it through methods others did not expect. "All Cathara ships," Thresh found himself saying, not quite understanding why. "Retreat. Full speed. Move beyond the heliopause." "Commander?" his weapons officer protested. "I said retreat. If the human is willing to die alone, the least we can do is give her the space to die in." Across the fleet, some commanders made the same choice. Others refused, thinking it cowardice or madness. But enough ships began pulling back that others followed, not wanting to be left behind. The Vex noticed the small ship immediately. How could they not? While thousands of vessels fled in every direction, one tiny frigate flew straight toward them like a moth diving into a star. To the collective intelligence that controlled the swarm, it made no sense. But sense did not matter. The Vex existed to consume, and here was prey offering itself. 1,000 hunter-killer drones broke formation and swept toward the Resolute. Behind them, 3 capital ships adjusted their course, their weapon ports opening like hungry mouths. The small human ship would be debris in seconds on the bridge of the Resolute. Captain Okonkwo watched the incoming swarm with eyes that held no fear. Around her, 47 souls sat at their stations, each one silent, each one ready. They had trained for this moment for 5 years. They had volunteered knowing they would never go home. Some had written letters to families. Others had recorded messages. A few had simply hugged their loved ones one last time without explaining why it felt so final. Distance to swarm center? Okonkwo asked calmly. 40,000 kilometers in closing, replied the navigation officer. Her name was Chen Lin, no relation to the ambassador. She was 23 years old. She had graduated top of her class at the academy. She had a boyfriend waiting on Mars who thought she was on a routine patrol mission. Her hands were steady on the controls. Enemy fire incoming, reported Lieutenant Park from Tactical. Impact in 5, 4, 3, the purple-black beams of Vex weapons converged on the Resolute. Every ship in the retreating fleet watched their sensors, waiting for the small frigate to dissolve like so many others had. Commander Thresh, now 50,000 kilometers away and still accelerating, found himself whispering a prayer to ancestors he had not spoken to in years. The beams struck. And the Resolute's shields held for exactly 3 seconds. The small ship's defensive systems absorbed energy that should have vaporized it 10 times over. Those 3 seconds were all Captain Okonkwo needed. Now, she said quietly. First Officer Rodriguez, who had not spoken since the ship began its final run, placed his hand on a panel that only he could activate. It required his fingerprint, his retinal scan, and a code that he had memorized but never written down. Command Authorization Rodriguez 7 Alpha. Initiate Cascade Protocol. The Resolute changed. From the outside it looked like the ship was dying. The hull split open along seams that had never been visible before, peeling back like a flower opening to the sun. Except inside was not the normal interior of a frigate. Inside was something that looked like a miniature star. Contained in rings of metal and energy fields that pulsed with barely controlled power, the Vex swarm paused. For the first time in the battle, the collective intelligence hesitated. Its sensors detected energy readings that made no sense. The small ship had been hiding something that registered as more dangerous than anything in the entire Galactic fleet combined. Then the Casimir Cascade generator activated, and space itself began to scream. It started as a point of absolute white light at the center of where the Resolute had been. Not bright like a star, bright like the absence of darkness, like reality had been bleached clean of everything including color. The point expanded into a sphere, growing at a measurable rate. 10 meters across. 100. 1,000. The first Vex hunter-killer drone touched the edge of the expanding sphere and ceased to exist. Not destroyed. There was no debris, no explosion, no energy signature. It was simply gone, as if it had been erased from reality by an invisible hand. The space where it had been was empty in a way that was wrong, cleaner than vacuum. As if even the concept of matter had been removed, the sphere kept expanding. 10,000 meters. 100,000. 1 million. More Vex ships touched the edge and vanished. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The collective intelligence tried to pull back, tried to flee, but the sphere was expanding faster than their ships could accelerate. It was growing faster than light itself, bending the normal rules of physics in ways that should not be possible on the bridge of the Wrath of Ages. Now, over 2 million kilometers away, Commander Thresh watched his sensor display with all 4 eyes wide. What is that? What in the name of all ancestors is that? His science officer, a young Cathara female named Kresh, was frantically working at her station. Her voice shook as she reported, "Commander, I can't. The readings make no sense. It's like the human ship is tearing reality apart at the quantum level. It's creating a cascade effect in the vacuum energy of space itself. Explain that in words I can understand." Thresh roared, though his voice carried more fear than anger. "It's rewriting the universe, sir. In that sphere, matter cannot exist. Energy cannot exist. The fundamental forces that hold atoms together are being unwoven, and it's expanding exponentially." The sphere had grown to encompass the entire center of the Vex formation. Capital ships the size of moons vanished by the dozens. The Vex tried everything. They fired weapons into the sphere, but the beams dissolved before they could reach the center. They tried to fly through it, but ships that entered never came out the other side. They tried to adapt, to evolve, to counter this new threat, but you cannot adapt to the universe itself rejecting your existence. The Luxari, with their crystalline bodies that could perceive wavelengths of light that other species could not. saw something that filled them with awe and terror. Ambassadors shine through darkness, watching from their command ship, made a sound that the translators struggled to interpret. It was something between a song and a scream. Beautiful, they whispered. Beautiful and terrible. The humans have weaponized creation itself. They have made a tool that unmakes reality. The sphere continued to expand. 5 million kilometers. 10 million. 20 million. It showed no signs of slowing. The entire Vex Armada, 147,000 capital ships and 8 million support craft, was inside the sphere now. They tried to escape, burning their engines at power levels that should have torn their ships apart. But they were not fast enough. Nothing was fast enough. One by one, section by section, the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced was simply erased. The biomechanical horrors that had consumed 17 galaxies. The world eaters that had never been stopped. The nightmare that had driven 247 species to unite in desperate alliance, all of it ceased to exist. The process took 17 minutes. For 17 minutes, the galactic fleet retreated at maximum speed while watching their sensors in horrified fascination. Some ships broadcast prayers. Others maintained strict silence. A few species had crew members who collapsed from the sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing. At the 18-minute mark, the sphere stopped expanding. It had grown to encompass a volume of space larger than most solar systems. Inside that sphere there was nothing. Not debris, not radiation, not even empty space in the normal sense. It was a hole in reality, a place where the universe had been convinced that nothing should exist. Then slowly the sphere began to collapse. It shrank at the same exponential rate it had grown, pulling back into itself. As it shrank, normal space rushed back in, filling the void. But what it filled was empty. Perfectly, absolutely empty. Cleaner than if someone had removed every atom individually. As if nothing had ever been there at all. 30 seconds later, the sphere collapsed completely. There was a flash of light visible across every wavelength, bright enough that several ships' sensors were temporarily blinded. Then silence. The Vex Armada was gone. 147,000 capital ships. 8 million support craft. The fleet that had ended 17 galaxies. Erased in less than 20 minutes, and the UESS Resolute was gone. Commander Thresh stared at his tactical display, which now showed nothing but empty space where moments ago there had been the largest battle in galactic history. His tactical officer was the first to speak. "Commander, I'm reading no life signs. No debris, no energy signatures. The Resolute, the human ship? It's gone. Check again," Thresh ordered, his voice hollow. "I've checked 3 times, sir. There's nothing? The ship, the crew, they were at the center of the effect. They couldn't have survived." Thresh slowly lowered himself into his command chair. His forearms hung limp at his sides. In all his years of warfare, in all the battles he had fought and won, he had never felt the way he felt now. The Vex were gone. The galaxy was saved. And he had mocked the humans for sending only one ship. "Captain Okonkwo," he whispered to the empty space where the Resolute had been. "What have you done? What did you sacrifice?" Across the fleet, the same realization was settling into every commander. Every crew member, every being who had witnessed what just happened. The humans had sent exactly what they said they would send. One ship. And that one ship had done what the entire combined military might of 247 species could not do, but the price had been absolute. 47 human lives, given willingly, erased from existence along with the enemy they had destroyed. No bodies to recover. No chance of rescue. Just gone. As thoroughly as the Vex themselves, Ambassador Shine Through Darkness of the Luxari was still staring at the empty space, their crystalline body pulsing with colors that indicated deep thought. Finally they spoke, their words broadcast to all nearby ships. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the battle. 3 days of shocked silence across hundreds of worlds. 3 days of analyzing sensor data that made no sense. 3 days of species realizing that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The Great Chamber was full for the first time in living memory. Every species had sent not just their ambassadors, but their military leaders, their scientists, their philosophers. The holographic forms that filled the space did not speak or argue. They simply stared at the human representative with a mixture of awe, gratitude, and fear. Ambassador Chun stood in the center of the chamber as she had 2 months ago, when she told them humanity would send one ship. But now the mockery was gone. Now there was only silence. The Archon spoke first, its ancient voice heavy with emotion. Ambassador Chun, on behalf of the Galactic Council, on behalf of all living beings in this galaxy, we offer our gratitude. The humans saved us. 47 of your people gave their lives so that trillions might live. We will never forget this sacrifice. Chun bowed her head slightly. Captain Sarah Okonkwo and her crew did what was necessary. They knew the cost. They paid it willingly. Oh, but we must know. Commander Thresh stepped forward, his forearms spread in a gesture of confusion. We must understand. What was that weapon? How long has Earth possessed such technology? And why, by all the ancestors, did you never tell us? The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. This was the question that had haunted every species since the battle ended. How could the humans, the youngest and supposedly weakest species in the Council, possess a weapon that made everything else obsolete? Chun took a breath. She had prepared for this moment, but that did not make it easier. What you witnessed was a Casimir cascade generator? We call it the CCG. It manipulates the quantum vacuum energy that exists in all space. When activated, it creates a cascade reaction that causes space-time itself to reject the existence of matter and energy within a defined area. A Luxari scientist, its crystalline body pulsing with rapid colors of thought, spoke up. Such technology should not be possible. The energy requirements alone would be enormous, Chun agreed. The device requires the total conversion of a fusion reactor the size of a small building, running at maximum output for 5 years just to charge the initial capacitor banks. The Resolute had been preparing for this mission since it was commissioned. The charging cycle alone took that entire time. And the ship? Asked the Meldari admiral. Your frigate was not really a frigate at all. The Resolute was built around the CCG. Everything else, the engines, the crew quarters, the life support was secondary. It looked like a standard frigate because we designed it that way. We needed it to pass through the galaxy without raising questions. Commander Thresh's voice rose with barely contained anger. You have possessed this weapon for how long? Chun met his four-eyed gaze without flinching. 70 years. We discovered the theoretical basis for Casimir Cascade technology 73 years ago. We built the first prototype 70 years ago. We tested it in an uninhabited star system in our own territory. And? Prompted the Archon. And the star system no longer exists, Chun said flatly. Not destroyed, gone? The star, the planets, the asteroids, even the space itself. For a volume of roughly 12 billion cubic kilometers, reality was rewritten. To this day, that region of space is empty in a way that violates normal physics. Nothing can exist there. Even light passing through that area is subtly altered. The chamber fell silent. The weight of what Chen was describing settled on every representative. This was not just a powerful weapon. This was something that could unmake creation itself. A Zephreni commander chittered through his translator. You tested a weapon that destroyed an entire star system. And you kept this secret for 70 years? Yes, Chun said simply. Why? The question came from Ambassador Celine of the VOR Collective, her voice sharp. With such a weapon, Earth could have conquered the galaxy. You could have made demands, seized territory, forced every species to bow to human rule. Why hide it? Chun turned to face Celine directly. Because we were terrified. The honesty in her voice silenced any response. Chun continued, her words measured but filled with emotion. When we saw what the first test had done, when we realized we had created something that could delete reality itself, our first reaction was horror. Do you understand? We did not celebrate. We did not see a path to power. We saw a nightmare. She gestured around the chamber. Imagine if this technology spread. Imagine if every species had access to it. How long before someone used it on an inhabited world? How long before a war wiped out not just populations but entire star systems? How long before some tyrant held the galaxy hostage with the threat of erasing planets that did not obey? The question should not be why we hid this weapon, Chun said, her voice growing harder. The question should be whether any species can be trusted with it. And you believe humans can be trusted? Celine challenged. You make this decision for all of us? We made this decision for ourselves, Chun corrected. 70 years ago, our government had a choice. We could weaponize this technology, build a fleet of CCG-equipped ships, and become the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Or we could bury it under the deepest classification protocols ever created and pray we never had to use it. We chose the second option. We classified everything related to the CCG at a level above even our nuclear weapons programs. On Earth, fewer than 100 people knew the technology existed. We continued building conventional ships. We maintained a modest fleet. We appeared to be exactly what we seemed, a mid-level military power, nothing special, nothing threatening. The Archon leaned forward. But you built the Resolute. You prepared for this possibility. We made a contingency plan, Chun acknowledged. If an extinction-level threat ever appeared, something that could not be stopped by conventional means, something that truly endangered all life in the galaxy, then and only then would we deploy a CCG device. One device. One ship. And only with a volunteer crew who understood they would not return. The Resolute was always meant to be a sacrifice. We established the program 40 years ago. Every 5 years we commissioned a new CCG-equipped ship and trained a new crew. The ships and crews rotated through what appeared to be normal patrol duties, but in reality they were always on standby. Ready for the day we hoped would never come. Chun's voice grew softer. Captain Okonkwo and her crew were the 9th rotation. They had served together for 5 years. They had trained for a mission they believed they would never actually fly. When the Vex appeared, they volunteered without hesitation. Every single one of them. Commander Thresh had been silent, processing everything, Chun said. Now he spoke, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. I mocked you. When you said you would send one ship, I called you cowards. I thought you were refusing to help. I know, Chun said without anger. That was part of the plan. If people thought we were cowards or incompetent, they would not look too closely at the ship we sent. They would dismiss it, ignore it, leave it alone. That was what we needed. But surely you could have told the Council, protested the Archon. We could have kept this secret together. We could have helped you prepare. Chun shook her head. With respect, Archon, could you? This chamber has 247 species. Could all of them keep this secret? Would none of them try to steal the technology? Would none of them be tempted to use it for their own purposes? The silence that followed was answer enough. Every representative in the chamber knew their own species' history. They knew about political factions, about military coups, about the times when power had been misused. The idea that such a weapon could be kept safe through widespread knowledge was naive. So what happens now? Asked a small voice. It was the representative from the Fennet, one of the species that had lost every ship they sent to fight the Vex. You have proven this weapon exists. You have shown it can save us. What do you intend to do with it? Ambassador Shun straightened her shoulders. This was the moment that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for centuries to come. Nothing, she said firmly. We will do nothing. The CCG technology remains classified. Earth will not share it, will not sell it, will not negotiate about it. This weapon stays in human hands under human control. The chamber erupted. Shouts of protest and anger filled the space. How dare humans make this decision alone? How dare they claim sole ownership of technology that affected the entire galaxy? Species demanded access, threatened sanctions. even suggested military action to force Earth's compliance. Chun waited for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The reason this weapon saved you instead of enslaving you is precisely because it remained in human hands. We know what it costs. We know what it means. We have spent 70 years living with the knowledge that we could destroy the galaxy at any time, and we chose not to. Every day for 70 years, we made that choice. You want to know if humans can be trusted with this power? Look at what we did. We had this weapon for 7 decades. We could have conquered you all. We could have made demands. We could have used the threat of the CCG to force every species to obey us. The debate lasted for 3 weeks. The greatest political and philosophical minds of 247 species argued about what should be done with humanity's secret weapon. Some wanted the CCG technology destroyed completely. Others demanded it be shared equally among all Council species. A few suggested humanity should be expelled from the Council for their decades of deception, but as the days passed, a truth became increasingly clear. The galaxy was divided not into those who wanted to control the weapon versus those who did not, but into those who understood what humanity had done versus those who could not accept it. Commander Thresh became an unexpected advocate for the human position. He had survived the battle against the Vex. He had watched his fleet torn apart, and he had watched the Resolute fly alone into death to save them all. In private meetings with other military commanders, his message was simple and powerful. "I do not trust the humans because they are good," he told a gathering of Cathara admirals. "I trust them because they are afraid. They fear this weapon as much as we should. That fear is what kept them from using it for conquest. That fear is what made them hide it for 70 years. That fear is what sent 47 of their people to die rather than risk the weapon falling into the wrong hands." The Luxari took a different approach. Ambassador Shine-Through Darkness spent days analyzing the sensor data from the battle, studying the way the Casimir Cascade had unmade reality. Their report to the Council was disturbing. "This weapon cannot be contained," Shine-Through Darkness explained to the Assembly. "If the technology spreads, if multiple species possess it, eventually someone will use it in anger or desperation. And unlike conventional weapons, where an arms race leads to bigger explosions, a CCG arms race leads to the destruction of reality itself. There is no defense. There is no counter. There is only annihilation." "The humans are correct," the Luxari ambassador concluded. "This weapon must be controlled by a single authority, one that has already proven they will not misuse it. The alternative is eventual galactic suicide." But not everyone agreed. The VOR Collective, a proud warrior species with a long military tradition, saw the situation differently. Ambassador Celine addressed the Council with barely contained fury. "You speak of trust and responsibility, but I see only manipulation," she declared. "The humans lied to us for 70 years. They sat in this chamber, voted on our laws, signed our treaties, all while hiding a weapon that made them the true power in the galaxy. How can we trust them now?" "Because they never used it," Ambassador Chun replied simply. 70 years, Ambassador Celine. 70 years of opportunities. We could have used the CCG to destroy the Cathara during the border disputes 20 years ago. We could have threatened the Zephyrini into giving us their trade routes. We could have erased the VOR homeworld when you declared war on our colony at New Harmony. But we did not. We kept the weapon hidden and resolved every conflict through normal means. Celine had no response to that. The VOR-human war had ended 30 years ago, settled through diplomatic negotiations and reparations. At the time, the VOR had believed they were dealing with a weak species that lacked the stomach for prolonged conflict. Now they understood the truth: humanity had possessed the power to end the war in seconds, but chose diplomacy instead. The turning point came when smaller species began speaking up. The Fennec representative, whose people had lost everything fighting the Vex, stood before the Council with a statement that silenced the chamber. "My species sent 20 ships to fight the Vex, 20 ships that carried the best and bravest of our people. All 20 were destroyed in the first 3 hours of battle. We lost thousands of warriors, including my own daughter, who commanded the Fennet Pride. The representative's voice broke slightly, but they continued. The humans sent one ship, 47 people. They could have sent conventional forces like the rest of us. They could have stayed safe and let others die. Instead, they sent their secret weapon, knowing it would reveal their secret, knowing they could never retrieve the technology or the crew. They gave everything. I do not care about your politics or your theories of power, the Fennet said, looking around at the larger, stronger species. I care that my daughter is dead and my people still exist because 47 humans decided that our lives were worth the cost. That is trust enough for me? One by one, the smaller species added their voices. The Delphani, who lost their entire defense fleet. The Auran, whose homeworld would have been next in the Vex's path. The dozens of minor species who had always been overshadowed by the great powers of the Council. They all understood something the larger species struggled with sometimes. Trust is not about logical analysis of power structures. Sometimes it is about who stood beside you when everything was ending. After 3 weeks of debate, the Archon called for a final vote. The resolution was called the Human Doctrine, and it was the most controversial legislation ever passed by the Galactic Council. The Human Doctrine stated Earth would maintain sole possession of Casimir Cascade generator technology. No human would ever be compelled to share this technology under any circumstances. Humanity pledged never to use CCG weapons for conquest, expansion, intimidation, or first strike capability. If another extinction-level threat appeared, humanity would deploy a CCG device with volunteer crew as they had against the Vex. The galaxy would not sanction, threaten, or take military action against Earth regarding this technology. The vote was not unanimous. 23 species voted against the doctrine, mostly larger military powers who disliked the idea of humanity holding such advantage. 17 species abstained, but 107 species voted in favor, enough to pass the resolution into galactic law. Ambassador Chun stood in the chamber after the vote and bowed deeply to the assembly. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I accept the responsibility you have placed upon us. I swear that we will honor this trust as we have honored it for the past 70 years. We will be the guardians of this terrible power, and we will only use it when there is no other choice. And if we misuse it? Asked Ambassador Celine bitterly. If future humans decide conquest is worth the risk? Jun looked at her steadily. Then the galaxy will unite against us, and we will deserve whatever comes. The doctrine works both ways, Ambassador. We are trusted with power, but we are also isolated by it. If we ever break that trust, we will stand alone. 6 months after the battle, a ceremony was held at the coordinates where the Resolute had activated its weapon. Ships from 60 species gathered in the empty space that had once contained the Vex Armada. They came not to celebrate victory, but to remember sacrifice. Earth had constructed a memorial. It was a simple thing by galactic standards, a crystalline structure that floated in space, powered by solar panels that kept it illuminated for centuries to come. Inside the crystal were the names of 47 humans. Sarah Okonkwo, Rodriguez, Park, Chun-Lin, all of them. Each name carved in every written language spoken by the Council species. Commander Thresh stood on his flagship and read the inscription at the base of the memorial. It was written in English first, then translated. Here stood the UESS Resolute. Here 47 souls gave everything so that life might continue. They were not warriors seeking glory. They were volunteers who understood the cost. They were human. Remember them. Remember what they taught us, that the greatest power is not in the weapons we build, but in the wisdom to use them only when we must. As the ships departed, returning to their homes and their peaceful lives made possible by those 47 deaths, Thresh made a decision. He sent a message directly to Ambassador Chun. You asked once why we should trust humanity with such power. I know the answer now. It is not because you are perfect. It is because you understand the weight of it. You carry this burden so others do not have to. That is something I can respect. Chun's response came hours later. Thank you, Commander. We hope we never have to use it again. But if that day comes, if another threat appears that cannot be stopped by conventional means, humanity will be ready. We will send another ship, another volunteer crew. We will pay the price again if we must, because that is what the doctrine means. Power without the willingness to sacrifice is tyranny. Power with sacrifice is protection. We chose to be protectors. We will remain protectors. Even if it costs us everything. Years passed. The galaxy rebuilt from the damage of the Vex attack. Trade routes reopened. Species that had been enemies found common ground in the shared experience of nearly losing everything. The Council grew stronger, more unified than it had been in centuries. And humanity continued as they always had. They built conventional ships and maintained a modest military. They traded, explored, and participated in galactic politics. To most observers, they seemed like any other mid-level species. Nothing special. Nothing threatening, but every 5 years, quietly and without announcement, Earth commissioned a new frigate. A ship that looked normal but carried humanity's darkest secret in its heart. A ship crewed by volunteers who trained for a mission they hoped to never fly, because somewhere beyond the galactic rim, in the vast darkness between galaxies, other threats might be waiting. Other horrors that conventional weapons could not stop.